This month's theme is Speaking Truth to Circumstance. And today's title is The Wise Warrior. So who is this wise warrior? The wise warrior is a practitioner of truth, a person that stands in power with poise, who looks out and sees what needs to be done, but with no fight necessary. When I was sitting here a few minutes ago, I remembered the warrior pose in yoga, so I will demonstrate. But see how grounded, solid, standing on truth, right? So there's a quote in our Science of Mind textbook, and it says, "One alone in consciousness with the infinite constitutes a complete majority." Pretty powerful, huh? So the wise warrior, what they do is they recognize that there is only one and that we're one already, and they bring that recentering process back into oneness. It's that consciousness that the wise warrior brings. And what we know is everything that's going on out there is a reflection of our consciousness. So I don't know about you, but I don't watch the news. I mean, people tell me what's going on. But I do know that there's a lot going on, right? It's like, gosh, I chose to come to this time on the planet for a reason. And what is mine to do, right? So Einstein reminds us that we can't solve a problem at the level of consciousness that created the problem. So what ours to do is change our thinking, our consciousness, our perspective, our beingness. If we want to change the world, we've got to change us. And it's good to remember that we can't change it all at once, that there's this thing as human beings that we go through, which is called time. And so what is ours to do? Edwin Gaines advises us to find our divine purpose by looking carefully at the world and pick one thing that we feel needs transforming, something that would be fun for us to get involved in, to help repair, shift, restructure, fix, or perfect. Notice fun. She put fun in there. And fun is the attribute of joy that is a part of God. And it's within us, right? So if we're looking out in the world and, my gosh, thinking, oh my gosh, that's horrible, which is, there's a lot of horrible things going on. And we think, I've got to do something about this. But if we're coming from it with an energy of, oh my gosh, how will this ever happen? This is way beyond what is possible. It doesn't come with that energy of fun, right? So remember, when you choose what it is yours to do, we've got to have fun doing it. And when we bring our consciousness of knowing that we are the divine in individualized expression, and that we're using the law of cause and effect every moment, we can consciously choose to treat for that which we want the world to be. But it all starts in here. So one of our great philosophers, Plotinus, said, "I do not argue, I contemplate. And as I contemplate, I let fall the seeds of thought into the mirror of mind, which then becomes the mirror of matter. And we know this, right? Just by looking at our teaching symbol. That our thoughts go into the fertile soil of the subjective mind, and then they show up as our reality. So, because we know this, it makes no sense whatsoever to try to change outward conditions by fighting against something. So when we know what it is that we're feeling called to do, and we say yes to that, this is a really important key. We don't go fight against it. I mean, we may feel that naturally. Of course, we're angry about it. It's horrible. But then we need to redirect that anger to be for something. So just imagine, right? I want you to feel the shift and the difference between being against something and for something. So imagine standing on the overpass bridge and you're fighting against something. There's this anger within you, and you feel righteous because you're wanting to make something better. So let's just use the example of war. We're out there protesting the war. And just imagine yourself doing that and see what it feels like inside of you. Okay, and now, imagine this, that instead of fighting against the war, you're standing on the bridge or walking through the town because you are for peace. See what that feels like inside of you, being for peace, right? For me, it feels like a whole different energy. So that's a little clue of how we create a world that works for all. Because as religious scientists, we know that when we fight against something, we bring about more of it. You've heard that saying, right? What we resist persists. Because the subconscious mind only knows to say yes. And so if I say, I don't want war, it only hears war. And that's what we create more of. So a perfect example of fighting against something and how it doesn't work is the war on drugs. The war on drugs has not brought us the effects that we want. In fact, recently, the New York Times printed that 110,000 Americans died from drug overdose in 2022. That's a lot. And I think about that, right? And I look at everything that's going on in the world, and I'm like, what in the world has happened? It's really sad. But the thing that has happened is the thing that has always been, that we forgot who we are. We came to the planet to do these things, whatever it is ours to do. But we've got to remember the truth of who we are. We've got to wake up. And when we redirect our anger and channel it into desire to make a positive difference in the world, we have the backing of the infinite power and presence of the One. We stand on Shiva, that we talked about last week, the destroyer of illusion. And we know the back of every horrible circumstance, there is a divine power and presence. So that's our work. Our work is to see rightly and center ourselves in this truth, that behind every horrendous circumstance, there is a divine power and presence. We often hear in our center that the news shows us what we need to be praying for. And I just want to remind us that if we aren't consciously praying for that which we want, the default mode is collective consciousness. And I like to call it the collective unconscious. So it's up to us to take that responsibility for creating a world that works for all by actively, consciously treating for the world that we want to see. Aman Motwani, in his book, You Can Change the World, who also wrote the book, Creating a World That Works for All, invites us to change how we see the world. And be prepared to get your pencil and paper out. He invites us to see the intrinsic worth of every person we encounter. And by doing this alone, we'll improve our interpersonal relationships. And the world is made up of relationships. So here's the 3 focus practices that he's inviting us to do. Number 1, instead of focusing on how little time we have, focus on how to make the most of what little time we have with every person. Number 2, instead of focusing on what you want to see instead of focusing on what you see on the outside of a person, focus on the person within. See both the pain and potential within them. Number 3, instead of focusing on what's wrong with a person, focus on what makes them right. See their strength within their weakness. I heard you laughing out there. So that's something probably every one of us could do today. Focus on what's right with the person that really press our buttons. So the wise warrior knows it's not our power that makes the change, but it's the power of the divine within us that we are co-creating with that makes the change. And as our founder, Ernest Holmes, said, there is a power for good in the universe, and we can use it. So let's use it for good. The good news is that all we have to do is wake up and remember who we are. And when we awaken to our truth of oneness with the divine and that we're all that, we make different choices, we make better choices to create a world that works for all. Those of us who are studying the energy codes, we're reading from Dr. Sue Morter, and she's inviting us to remember that we're all energy, that everything is energy, that we're all connected by this energy field. And so I decided to start practicing that when I look out and I see you, to remember that I'm looking at an energy being and that we're all connected. And so in my mind's eye, I've been practicing just seeing us in this field of energy. And it makes me more aware that my thoughts are affecting every single one of you. So the wise warrior sees rightly. And I invite us to think about that this week. Last week we talked about the goddess Kali. She destroyed the demons, right? She was standing on Shiva, the destroyer of illusion. And we can think of our thoughts as those demons. Those thoughts that keep us in a mindset of separation, of duality, of me versus you, or us versus them. Those are the demons. The truth is that we know there's only one power, one presence, one life, and that we are living it. It is that power, presence, and life that is Spirit in, through, and as us. And we get to live this good God life every day. When I wake up, I'm like, oh my gosh, I get to live God's life again. What a blessing. And I get to because every breath I take is that breath of the infinite breathing me. And so there's a shift in consciousness I want us to embody. And it's going from thinking of ourselves as separate to remembering that we aren't separate. We are one. And in order to do that, we need to wake up to our spiritual magnificence and create a world that works for all. We get to do it by having fun. Don't forget the fun. Boy, I've been really telling myself that all week, and it's really important to find that balance, especially when we're out there working for some really good changes in the world. It can feel a little tiring. So go have fun. My brother was here from the Bay Area yesterday, and he asked me to go see Oppenheimer last night. Has anybody seen that? Wow. Well, somehow I missed history when I switched from high school to another high school. And so I'm continuing to learn history, and it was fascinating, this story about the guy who helped invent the atom bomb. And it was interesting to watch him struggle with the moral dilemma of what he was doing. But there was this race to create the atom bomb, because if we didn't create it first, the Germans might create it first, right? So it was us versus them, us against them. It's this race to be, I'm just thinking about this right now, better, stronger, more powerful than the other person, the other country. That's such an illusion. There's only one of us. And when they dropped that bomb, Oppenheimer, he was a visionary. He would see things. And he saw the effects of that decision that our leaders made to do that. And he felt horrible. He felt like he had blood on his hands. And so then what he did was he started imploring, speaking. He did whatever he could for our leaders to think about going for making that hydrogen bomb. Like, maybe that's not the best thing to do, And so he switched his focus, and he stood in his truth. He knew the right thing for him, what his work was to do. And so many people were against what he was saying, but he had to say it. He had to be himself. It was his to do. The things we do to ourselves, huh? But the good news is that we can choose again. We can see the world rightly with our spiritual vision. We can see that we are not separate. We're in this beautiful blanket of the sea of love and light. And when we can see with our spiritual eyes, then we can make different choices. So one of the things that we can do is take time to vision. What is it that is Spirit's highest idea for your life? And say yes to that. Contemplate what Spirit's greatest idea as your life is, and simply allow yourself to be the willing vessel. Let Spirit have its way with you, and watch with amazement how the universe makes clear the way before you to live your greatest purpose and do what you've come here to do to bless the planet. In closing, I'll leave you with this quote by Max Dupree. The greatest thing is, at any moment, to be willing to give up who we are in order to become all that we can be. So it is.